It's finally happening. If you've been waiting for your breakthrough lately, this might be your moment. Saturn almost never hands out rewards. It usually pushes, pressures, and forces people to grow whether they're ready or not. But tomorrow, something rare is happening. Venus steps beside Saturn, and for a brief moment, Saturn stops testing and actually starts rewarding, one of the rarest things Saturn ever does. But here's the thing, this isn't a blessing for everyone, because this conjunction is only looking for a certain type of soul, and it might just be yours. This is the alignment that rewards the uncomfortable soul. Tomorrow's Venus-Saturn conjunction isn't soft, pretty, or gentle. It's selective. The soul that held on to their values even when it would have been easier to abandon them. Most people only show integrity when it benefits them. But the ones this alignment is looking for, they chose patience even when it felt like nothing was happening. And that's why they get the breakthrough, because this alignment favors the soul who is comfortable being uncomfortable. The soul who grows in silence, evolves without applause, and keeps going without validation. Those are the ones Saturn lifts. Those are the ones Venus blesses. And those are the ones who are about to finally see the payoff that's been building for months. Why you might feel more protective of your energy. Tomorrow's Venus-Saturn conjunction activates a kind of inner seriousness that you don't feel every day, the sense that your time, your attention, and your emotional bandwidth suddenly matter more than people realize. You may notice yourself pulling back from conversations that go nowhere, habits that drain you, or people who take more than they give, not out of coldness, but because something inside you finally knows its worth. This alignment sharpens your priorities. It makes distractions feel heavier, obligations feel clearer, and your peace feel non-negotiable. What once felt harmless may now feel like a slow leak, and what once felt optional may now feel essential. And that shift is not a sign of detachment, it's a sign of maturity. One of the biggest realizations this energy brings is the simple truth: your energy is currency, and you can't afford to spend it carelessly anymore. This subtle instinct to protect your inner world is not a wall, it's a doorway. It marks the beginning of stronger personal boundaries, the kind that aren't built from fear, but from clarity. And once this clarity arrives, it changes the way you show up for people and the way you expect them to show up for you. But this protective shift leads directly into something deeper, something this alignment exposes in a way that's impossible to ignore. The end of performative spirituality. One of the most unexpected effects of this conjunction is the way it exposes the difference between people who have genuinely grown and people who have only looked like they have. Venus is the part of you that knows how to present yourself, the softness, the charm, the image. Saturn strips the image away and asks the only question that matters: what's left when nobody is watching? This alignment creates a moment of truth for those who have built their spiritual identity around appearances. The aesthetic, the language, the persona. This can feel uncomfortable, not because they're being judged, but because their foundation is being revealed. Saturn isn't punishing them, it's simply refusing to engage with anything that isn't real. For the quiet souls who have been doing the work without posting it, announcing it, or decorating it, this alignment hits differently. They may feel a wave of internal validation, as if something finally recognizes the weight of their effort. There's a quiet confirmation that whispers, the work you do in silence is louder than anything you could ever say. Tomorrow's energy rewards sincerity over performance. It rewards intention over presentation. It rewards the people who chose growth even when no one applauded and no one cared. And as Venus meets Saturn, those quiet choices begin to shine in ways that only truth can. Why some souls actually thrive under pressure. Saturn has a reputation for being heavy, demanding, and relentless. But that's only true for people who rely on momentum instead of intention. Saturn filters out anything built on hype, impulse, or temporary enthusiasm. The moment this energy arrives, anything shallow collapses under its weight. But the people who have been moving with purpose rather than excitement, they don't shrink under Saturn, they sharpen. This is why some souls actually thrive when Saturn steps onto the stage. Pressure doesn't break them, it clarifies them. When other people freeze, they focus. When other people get overwhelmed, they get organized. When others doubt themselves, they suddenly feel more rooted in who they are and what they stand for. Saturn doesn't suffocate them, it reveals their strength. This conjunction highlights that exact difference. Tomorrow's energy has nothing to do with punishment and everything to do with recognition. It recognizes the people who learned resilience, the hard way, the ones who didn't collapse when life got slower, the ones who held steady when it would have been easy to drift off course. These are the souls who feel empowered instead of intimidated during this alignment. A lot of people underestimate themselves until Saturn arrives, and then something in them shifts. They begin to see that responsibility isn't a burden. It's a doorway. Loyalty doesn't feel restrictive. It feels stabilizing. Commitment doesn't feel scary. It feels like a natural next step. They realize they are capable of handling things that once felt too big: deeper relationships, long-term decisions, and choices that require courage instead of convenience. Pressure doesn't create strength. It reveals the strength you forgot you had. And once that strength shows itself, everything that comes next begins to change. What Venus is actually asking. And now it's time for today's comment of the day. If you are an ocean, stay an ocean. Do not become a lake just because some people cannot swim in your depths. This one is poetic, but the message is very real. Not everyone will understand you. Not everyone will be comfortable with your depth, your thinking, your growth, or the way you move through life. And sometimes there's pressure to shrink a little, to simplify yourself so others feel more at ease. But this comment reminds us of something important. Depth is not a flaw. You're not meant to become smaller just because someone else can't meet you where you are. The right people don't ask you to become a lake, they learn how to swim. Thank you for sharing this powerful perspective. People love to talk about Venus as the planet of love, beauty, and pleasure, but that's barely scratching the surface. The deeper, more transformative role of Venus is this: it governs what you allow yourself to want. Most people don't realize how much they restrict themselves long before life ever does. They tone down their desires, shrink their dreams, and convince themselves to settle before they even try, not because they lack ambition, but because they fear disappointment. They believe wanting too much will hurt more than wanting nothing at all. Tomorrow's Venus-Saturn conjunction makes that quiet self-sabotage impossible to continue. Saturn steps in like a mirror, reflecting every place you've deliberately lowered your standards. Venus brings forward the truth of what you actually want, not the safe version, not the watered-down version, but the real version. And for many people, that sudden clarity feels both terrifying and liberating. This alignment breaks the ceilings you built inside your own mind. The limits you placed on your desires start to dissolve, and what you truly want begins rising to the surface with a level of precision that's impossible to ignore. You may find yourself admitting things you've been suppressing for years, dreams you talked yourself out of, relationships you convinced yourself were unrealistic, goals you quietly placed on a shelf because you didn't want to face the sting of wanting them. Venus isn't asking, what do you love? Venus is asking, what have you been too afraid to want? And Saturn's role is even more surprising. Instead of shutting those desires down, Saturn stabilizes them. It gives them form. It gives them direction. It gives them structure. What once felt like an unrealistic wish begins to feel like something you can actually build, not quickly, not recklessly, but realistically. This conjunction is not chaos. It's precision. It's a moment where your true desires stop whispering and start insisting. And the life you're meant to build becomes impossible to ignore. Why your constraints are your superpowers. Saturn gets treated like the villain of astrology, the planet that limits, restricts, slows, and blocks. But if you look closely at your life, every evolution you've ever gone through was shaped by some form of limitation. Constraints don't cage you, they carve you. They strip away the excess, the noise, the habits that dilute your potential. They force you to become deliberate instead of reactive, committed instead of chaotic. And during this Venus-Saturn conjunction, those constraints become something far more powerful than obstacles. They become the architecture of your next breakthrough. This alignment brings a rare kind of clarity where you start noticing which limitations have actually been protecting you rather than punishing you. For example, the relationships that didn't move forward weren't rejections, they were redirections. The opportunities that stalled didn't fail, they saved you from paths that couldn't sustain the version of you you're becoming. When Saturn steps in with Venus beside it, you begin to understand that discipline isn't the opposite of desire. It's the container that keeps desire from leaking everywhere. But what makes this moment so transformative is the sudden awareness of which constraints are real and which ones were implanted into you by other people. Family expectations, past failures, outdated beliefs, fears that never belonged to you. These are the walls that Saturn now exposes as false, and once you see them for what they are, they lose their power. You start questioning habits you inherited rather than chose, responsibilities you accepted without thinking, and rules you've been following long after they stopped making sense. Are you being guided by your limits, or are you being defined by limits that were never yours to begin with? And when that realization clicks, something incredible happens. The pressure that once felt exhausting begins to feel purposeful. You recognize that Saturn isn't there to shrink you, it's there to strengthen the shape of the life you're building. And suddenly, the walls that once felt confining become supportive. The boundaries become empowering. The challenges become fuel. Constraints stop being chains and start being superpowers. These two planets have something against each other. Venus and Saturn don't naturally get along, and that's exactly why this conjunction is so powerful. Venus wants what feels right, what feels exciting, what brings beauty and connection and pleasure. Saturn wants what's earned, what's proven, what can stand on its own without collapsing under pressure. When these two planets enter the same space, it's like watching desire walk into a room where discipline is already sitting at the table waiting to ask, how serious are you really? This tension creates a level of internal honesty most people aren't used to. Suddenly, your wants and your responsibilities aren't separate anymore. They start negotiating with each other. Venus pushes forward with the vision of the life you want, while Saturn questions whether the foundations beneath it can actually hold the weight. And this isn't conflict, it's refinement. Venus dreams, Saturn builds. Together they turn fantasy into something that can actually last. Most people think spiritual or emotional growth comes from harmony, but the truth is that harmony rarely changes anyone. It's friction that transforms. It's the friction between what you desire and what your discipline demands that forces you to evolve. This conjunction brings forward that exact friction, but in a way that's constructive rather than chaotic. It's the perfect collision between impulse and intention, pleasure and purpose, vision and structure. You may feel pulled between two directions, wanting something deeply while also sensing the responsibility that comes with it. But that tension doesn't mean something's wrong, it means something real is forming. It means your desires are maturing into commitments. And your commitments are aligning with something you genuinely want, not something you're forcing yourself into, and not something you're chasing out of fear. This is why tomorrow's energy feels different from anything that's happened lately. And what emerges from that negotiation is a version of you that doesn't just want more, it's a version of you that can actually hold more. Desire without discipline dissolves, but discipline without desire is just survival. This conjunction merges both, creating a rare moment where your soul stops choosing one or the other and begins choosing the life that honors both. What gets permanently closed by this event? Every conjunction opens a door, but Saturn always makes sure another one closes. And this is where tomorrow's energy becomes truly transformative. Saturn doesn't shut things down out of punishment, it shuts them down out of completion. It seals chapters that have overstayed their welcome, patterns that have nothing left to teach you, connections that drain instead of strengthen, and versions of yourself that can no longer support where you're going next. This event finalizes endings that have been lingering in the background for a while. Maybe you felt the signals, ignored them, or told yourself you could push through and make it work. Maybe you stayed out of obligation, fear, nostalgia, or a belief that walking away meant failure. Saturn doesn't care about the story you built around it, it cares about alignment. It closes what cannot support your expansion, and it does it with precision. But the most important part is this. The closure isn't meant to feel like loss, it's meant to feel like relief. The pressure you've been feeling around certain situations begins to dissolve. Not because you forced anything, but because the energetic contract behind it has expired. When Saturn closes a chapter, it means the lesson is complete. It means the weight you are carrying is no longer yours to hold. It means the structure you are maintaining has reached its limit, and it's time to step into something better built. And for many people, this ending won't happen externally. First, it happens internally. You stop chasing what drains you. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't listen. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop carrying responsibilities that were never yours. And once the internal door shuts, the external world follows. Saturn closes doors not to limit your future, but to protect it. Some doors don't close because you're losing something, they close because you've outgrown the room entirely. This alignment guarantees that what ends now is supposed to end, and what remains is what you're meant to build your next chapter upon. If you made it to this part, I want to thank you. Whatever tomorrow brings, move into it with calm confidence. You're not behind, you're not late. You're aligning with something that was always meant to find you. And the best part is that you don't have to push or prove anything, just keep choosing what feels honest and grounded. The rest will meet you exactly when it should. Hope is alive in this alignment. Let it guide you.